Good morning. Thanks for you to tune in and listen into what's happening in the world of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Would call it a hype for now, but it is becoming uh, real every hours of the day. Um, this has been an exciting week. Has been lots has been forming this whole year since 2024. What has been forming very well is the byproduct of all the budgets, all the uh, spending that's been happening in 2023. And finally, people come to realizing uh, how fast and how furiously it is coming towards our daily operations, be it in business, be it in personal life. One thing that I really wanted to articulate in this conversation today is NPUs. But before I dive more into NPUs and explaining about NPUs, um, really just want to say that this is about the fifth month of 2024. My understanding of what would happen in 2024 and 2023, from my ability to look into the future from 2023, I can guarantee you I've been wrong about maybe 80% of things. But hardware wise, all the prediction has been sort of on point, right? And that's just not me. That's just the industry in general can predict what the hardware looks like. Given that Gordon Moore's law of every few years you'll have a better hardware, faster, more efficient, PPAs, power, performance, and area. So area shrinks, power consumption goes down, and the performance goes up, right? So you have these capabilities that you can predict. And if you have the right sort of logistics, and if the logistics don't miss a mark, you end up with a great product. And of course, every product that you have seen hardware wise improves so frequently, right? It's a little slower than the software. Software, seems to improve and update very more. Let me use the correct word here. It's updated more frequently versus hardware. It has the logistics behind it. It's a physical product, lives in a physical world, not so much digital. So, product hardware wise, we can predict, right? So I'm wrong 80% of the time, but what I love about making predictions about hardware is that it tends to come true, right? If you look at the the consumer's need for it, right? The consumer's adaptation for it. That's the hard miss, right? That's the hard miss because you really don't know which product will actually be picked up by the consumer because consumer saw this hardware before this hardware actually came out, and then they don't have time to compare and contrast. They just go after the first one and they stick to it, or the second one never catches up because there's no demand for it, even though the second one actually had a better use case for it. So, having said all of that, having said that 2023, we had lots of budgets that were being worked on, lots of financing that's being worked on. A lot of the hardware pieces that was being built behind the scene, some of those products we've been seeing throughout 2024. You've seen Blackwell from NVIDIA. You have seen, of course, the robots. Like robots are, really high up. I'm talking about semiconductor chips here, right? Those are tiny micro uh, hardware that is, not necessarily what a regular consumer would see on a daily basis. So if the robots were hardware, the humanoid robots that are hardware, we're seeing more of those coming along, right? NPUs is something of a very specific interest that I have because as I'm learning from what the companies are discussing about the capabilities and the lineup of the demands, like the customers' demand for these hardwares, tells me that I probably have some gap in knowledge, right? Is because I am not necessarily putting this hardware, the small microchips, into a bigger hardware, right? A system that is like a humanoid robot. But there's a demand for all of this because people are lining up to buy these chips. People are lining up to buy these robots. People are lining up to make these hardware, uh, personalize these hardwares to their use cases. And they will utilize these robots and hardwares, the NPUs and CPUs and GPUs, for whatever operations that they have. And that is something that, uh, unless we go to industry by industry, we're not going to be able to figure out who's doing what with all these hardwares. So you can always assume that the humanoid robots will be on a shop floor and manufacturing shop floor, and manufacturing shop floor will utilize to pick up heavy items, so that way they don't have to necessarily deal with, say for example, OSHA violation, right? Or they don't have to really worry about not having a nighttime operation where the warehouse can do heavy lift and shift at nighttime, and in daytime its operational becomes far more smoother because things are where we're supposed to be because of this heavy lift and shift. So that's just a one use case of robots. And then if you look at it from a micro level about these chips, well, how do you utilize those chips in different industry and different types of hardware, right? So yes, you can get your hands on those chips. You can get your hands on those chips, and how do you make use of those chips, right? So there's a whole lot of use cases that this chips will be dedicated to. A whole lot of use cases this humanoid robots will be dedicated to. Well, one specific one, which is the NPU, will cause some changes in adaptation of this hardware. So, let's say, for example, a lot of the businesses are actually lined up. They're on a waiting list to get their hands on those chips, right? And once they do get their hands on it, and now they have to adapt to it, it's not the same as CPU. We have a lot of subject matter expertise on CPUs. We have had some subject matter expertise coming along with GPUs. And what I mean by that is that CPU is what's widely used, and there's more knowledge on CPUs for the CPU usage. GPU wise, there are good knowledge about GPUs out there, but not everybody is using GPU at all times. So there's a less actual user of GPUs that are working with GPUs on a daily basis. So you have a good knowledge base, but at the same time, it's not as wide as CPUs. So NPUs, I think, will have to go through the same. But the good thing about NPUs, CPUs, and GPUs is that they can complement each other. So one good example of that is that the GPUs is what will train your AI machine learning solution, whereas CPU will be the one that does the inferences. And when you have NPUs, it actually will complement your capability to do edge device data processing, right? So, the data that needs to be processed and cannot have data in motion from point A to B with 5, 10 miles or 500 miles, right? It literally is few millimeters away from each other, and then they're able to data process that much quicker. And these data process is what allows some of these NPUs to be highly attractive for not just the purposes of personal computer usage or business computer usage, for embedded systems, SCADAs, and you have aircraft ship in the middle of the ocean, or just predictive analytics of what sort of decisions to be made in an edge case, right? I think that's a game changer, right? That's a game changer that we sort of predicted, hey, this will happen. But one thing we couldn't predict is how fast it will happen. So to see the hardwares that Microsoft announced this week, NPU being so powerful that literally a Microsoft laptop is an AI laptop now, right? I think it's worth mentioning that at this point, the race is not even a race anymore. I think for Microsoft to have released that laptop ahead of everybody else, that gives Microsoft the edge to do a better version iteration. And that version iteration, I think, will catch many of the other laptop developers, laptop manufacturers uh, off guard. Because it's one thing to change the laptop hardware surface. I get that. But to change your OS into a whole nother dimension, um, I think a lot of the manufacturers will have to rely on Microsoft for near future on some of these topics because they will become the subject matter expert because they were the first in line. So that's deviating from NPUs, but going back to NPUs, I think they do complement the CPUs, GPUs, and NPUs. They're complementing each other, and that is a great future forward, right? Because you've seen the race for semiconductor chips, you've seen the chips' ability to do power, performance, and area shrinks, performance goes up, power consumption goes down, and that capability that's coming online right now, I think will continuously shift the way we are interacting with our laptops, right? Um, I did a tongue-in-cheek title here, called it a State of the Union, right? A State of the AI Union. I think it's necessary that we do consider how much things have changed just within last 5 months of this year, right? Because when I thought about hype cycle and back in 2021, I was hoping for a hype cycle. And as I was hoping for that hype cycle, I was hoping for that hype cycle to happen over a good stretch of period and to die down on another stretch of period, right? I was hoping that the hype will die down probably faster. Well, I was hoping for a slower, but it is dying down a lot faster because people are realizing a lot quicker than what I anticipated that how powerful these AIs are actually, right? Because when you see it in a silo with few people using it, all of a sudden you see a mass consumer using it, and the interest, the amount of investment into it, the hardwares that are coming online for the consumer to use, it's catching on. And I think it's a good paced movement, but I believe the hype cycle will die down a lot faster. People are actually realizing because once the hardware is in line, the hardware is in place, the consumer expectation goes up. As in, that's a managed expectation because the hardware is a choke point for all the software capabilities. So when the consumer has a good expectation, now they know what it's capable of. The cat is out of the bag, so really have to adjust how we do business from now on. I think things are shifting rather rapidly, and for these capabilities that I'm talking about, think about it, right? Like ChatGPT. There's a huge scandal that's happening with Scarlett Johansson and OpenAI, but that's just the surface level news. But if you think about what's actually happening based on this, is that using existing hardware, you're able to do voice communication like a real person, sort of like a Jarvis, and it is far more superior than Siri and Alexa. But it didn't really change anything in the hardware. But now imagine having a hardware that enables you to have the same experience, but just greater, just much better, right? Because right now, ChatGPT is utilizing somebody else's hardware to give you those access to, ChatGPT, the voice of Sky, voice of personal assistant like Sky. What happens to a laptop that you probably don't use that keyboard that often anymore because the system comes online as soon as it sees your face, right? Biometric detection. And that biometric detection is not super power consuming because it's built into the hardware and you have all these other capabilities that allows you to do voice conversational like a laptop interaction. And you have these capabilities of, kind of dodging the personal privacy side of things, but just by using your eye movement, your retina movements, system is able to do more than enough for you, right? As in, you no longer have to scroll, maybe, or it knows that you have read the last the last piece of the article, last word in the article, so that way it can move on to the next part of the article, right? So it doesn't even have to be a voice command anymore. It doesn't have to be something that you have to use your 5, 10 fingers for. It's literally is just doing everything it does based on your physical movement. So if you're not paying attention to an article, that article is not going to move. But once you are paying attention, it knows where you left it and where to pick it up from, right? And then it moves up as your eye moves up and down. So you have all these capabilities that are not possible today because of the limitation in the hardware. But the hardware that is super augmented by artificial intelligence and machine learning, now the click of a mouse is an old past tense. We used to do that. We don't do that anymore. I think those are the kind of capabilities that we're going to see more and more of. And that's going to happen because of this hardware. So the last word here is that the NPUs are probably in its infancy, even to this day, right? It will mature. It will mature much more. Going back to that PPA, the size of the area will shrink, and it will be able to process more. And if there's a need for more NPUs to work with each other in order to help the CPUs and GPUs to give you that experience that you do not have currently, I think the future will be far different than what we are envisioning. The future will be far more futuristic than what we previously thought it would be, and that's okay as long as it's in it's being done with some considerations of safety, security, and privacy, right? Like I said, retina movement is not probably that big of an issue for digital natives because they don't consider this as a privacy violation. However, your eye movements and your ability in your facial muscles gives away a lot of metadata that could be used for marketing purposes, could be used for tracking purposes, and could be used for malicious purposes eventually, or from the very beginning. Would not jump into that. But the point is, these NPUs will enable a lot of these safety, security, and privacy either in a positive way or in negative ways, right? So we really have to consider how powerful these NPUs are and how they will change the way we do business now, right? When I mentioned laptop is just beginning, right? There's hundreds of semiconductor chips in my peripheral as I'm speaking to you right now, and these semiconductor chips are as good as the semiconductor chips that we know from other semiconductor chips. But when you have a competition of a smaller subset of semiconductor chips that are far more powerful and cost less and is able to consume less power, these other semiconductor chips eventually becomes irrelevant, right? Just like all the other semiconductor chips that has come and gone that we no longer use. We still use 25 nm semiconductor chips in some places, but not everywhere. But we did use 25 nm when it was latest and greatest widely for a very long time. But eventually it went away. But now that NPUs is in the mix and is being put out and open to the public, and its capability is going to become very relevant in our daily life, we will have a race towards it, and we will have a competition to say who's the old news and who's the new, right? And this race is going to be something interesting to keep up with because I was in a conversation with somebody this week, and we were talking about how people are booking for access to data processing, right? They're advanced scheduling their data processing power because they know they will need it. And there's a queue out there to book the data processing. So that way, once they are able to data process in the right time, they will be able to go to the market at the right time, right? So kind of that, even though there's data processing that are happening, there are people in line to do data processing because not everybody has the hardware to do the data processing. But once you do your data processing, is because you are in that phase where you are data processing, right? And a lot of organizations, in my understanding, hasn't even started the process of requirement gathering, designing, right? But if you don't have these forward-looking understanding of how data processing works, by the time you get to development, you don't have capability to develop anymore because your hardware it's not available, and whatever the hardware you need, you have to be on a line to get to your turn, right? I hope this kind of piqued your interest about NPU. You will be able to look up NPUs on the Google. We'll do some research on YouTube. But once you see NPU, I think one of the considerations you'll make is that these NPUs are so powerful, and there's so many other powerful hardwares that you will need in order to have this NPU do this job properly. These will become really something that is very sought after. We are seeing that with NVIDIA right now. We've seen it for NVIDIA since COVID with blockchain and GPUs. But here we are. We're discussing this early on, so that way we have some preparations that we're not shocked by in coming days. So if you have any questions on this matter, if you have any concerns on this matter, feel free to put a comment here. Let us know, what are you thinking, and where are things with you in your company, and where are you in the journey, and how it is that we can help you on mile 10 or mile 1 or mile 5, wherever you are. We're able to help you get you through this process in an optimized manner. And there's a whole lot to consider when it comes to hardware, and certainly we're not talking about electric grid yet. But that's just some part of the conversation we can have eventually. But the point is, let's get started. Let's get started early. Be proactive about it, and I think the benefits of being proactive will show itself over time. Thank you all. Have a good week, and we'll talk soon.